All right. We are live. Hey, everybody. Rex Bear Leak Project. How the heck are you? Beautiful day out here today. High elevation, Southern Colorado. And we have an awesome guest with us. I am super excited to learn more about you, Hakim. We have Hakim Isler with us and talk about a resume. So you have been on several TV shows like Naked and Afraid, and you have been in martial arts for much of your life. Retired veteran. Thank you for your service. I have family and friends that served in Iraq and Afghanistan. So, wow, talk about a wild time to be alive. But today, folks, we're going to talk about these incredible games called PSI games, like psychic capabilities. What are our psychic capabilities? We're going to talk about a possible blackout scenario and how to survive when the electrical grid fails, if it does happen. And some people say it's not if, but when. How the heck are you, Hakim? It's great to meet you. Thanks for being a guest on Leak Project.
Thanks. I appreciate it. I'm doing good. I'm here in sunny California, so at Contact in the Desert. And so I'm living it up right now. I'm really excited.
Right on. You know, the last time I was at Contact in the Desert was, I think, 2019 was when I went out there. And had a blast. Went and checked out some geoglyphs out there. They're called the Blythe Indigo geoglyphs. I don't know if you've heard of them or not.
No.
So it's about an hour from where you're at, and there's these large geoglyphs, kind of like the Nazca ones. They're a little bit different, but very fascinating off the 33rd degree parallel out there. And I did some digging and some research and looking through satellite imagery and stuff, and it looked like some of them have been covered up from like tractors. Maybe it was the farmer out there that had some land that didn't want people to know about it. I don't know, but it was very weird. Wow. But it's a cool area out there. So the event starts today, Contact in the Desert, right?
It started yesterday. But today is when the real thing, it starts to really kick up. So
cool. Okay. And you're going to be speaking there today or this
Yes.
week?
Yeah, I'll be teaching today. I spoke yesterday. I'll speak again today and then do a workshop. And then I lead a panel today. So busy day.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so let's just jump right in. I know your time is very valuable and we have limited time today. So what made you decide to join the Army?
Oh, so that's a good question. So I was studying in Ninjutsu at the time. I lived in Ohio, and the ninja were in the past, they were like these survivalist wilderness people who also did the way they survived against this major threat at the time was to use psychological warfare and things of that nature. And that was because they knew a lot about the human psyche and how the mind worked. And I was training with this teacher who was the first American to go to Japan and bring that martial arts back to America. So I was really enjoying my time with him. And I started going to executive protection school, bodyguard school, because I was like, I'm going to be a bodyguard. I'm going to do this. And during one of his classes, this gentleman came, and I had already been thinking maybe I should try the Army. And this gentleman came to his class, and he was in PSYOP, and he started telling me about it. And he was like, if you go in, don't go special forces, go PSYOP, because you'll be in the special operations community. You'll get a lot of the same training. You guys will go hand in hand, but it's just a different route, but it's still special operations. So I was like, that sounds really interesting. And 9/11 had happened, and I really wanted to use my skill sets to help serve my country at this very incredibly tough time that we were facing with all that was going on. And so I decided I was going to give it a shot and go in and serve my country in that way. I had already been serving my family and my community, but I had not served my country, and that was one of the things that I definitely wanted to do.
Psychological operations. Wow. Okay. So special forces like Green Beret, Delta Force, stuff like that. Fascinating. And I've got a friend that I went to high school with. We were best friends in high school, and he ended up getting into some trouble in high school. Like towards the end, I ended up moving to another location, but I found out what he did. And I'm not going to say on air, but I was like, okay. And then I was like, if the military picks this guy up, he's going to go places. And sure enough, the military, he actually was able to get into the Marines, and he was working with Delta Force, Navy SEALs, a bunch of just super ass kicking dudes in the military, and he said that's one of the things he said is like the special operations and the psychological divisions were just the cutting edge. And I'm fascinated with that. I think that's incredible. So you took your training with ninjutsu and incorporated that into psychological operations in the military?
Yeah. Basically, I took, all that I knew. I joined the military, and then they trained me in psychological operations. And then I had now both wells to pull from in my, in my actual operational environment. So that was something that I felt was very helpful and beneficial in my training. Or in my real world action when I was out in Iraq. So I really appreciated having both spectrums that I was able to pull from.
That's pretty cool, man. And ninjutsu.
Yeah.
What is ninjutsu? Like, is it more like mixed martial arts, or would you say it's more like karate or taekwondo or all of the above? None of the above?
That's a great question. So it is like a mixed martial art in the sense that the ninja really wanted to use whatever was at their disposal to survive. And a lot of the arts in the past were like mixed martial arts. We tend to see specializations nowadays, but in the past you had to be well versatile, right? You had to learn how to shoot a bow, and you had to learn how to use a spear and how to use a sword. And what if that gets knocked away? You have to learn how to fight with your hands. So a lot of the warriors throughout different cultures had that mixed martial arts mentality. The ninja were also these survival people living in the wilderness. So they also had the survival skills of like, how do I deal with, how do I find herbs? How do I deal with sickness? How do I find food while I'm out here in the mountains of Japan? How do I live in these harsh conditions? And then ultimately, if I have to defend myself physically, how do I do that? But they really weren't the way we think about them in the movies. Is we say like they were untouchable, they had the most coolest the best martial arts, and they really didn't want to fight. Their goal was to not fight, to gain information and intel so that they didn't have to do that. That was their worst case scenario because there were so few of them. So if you're thinking about just like our CIA, if you're thinking about a group of people who are very, very small. It's only like a couple hundred or less of these folks. You don't want to be out there fighting, because each time you lose a person, that person is super valuable to the survival of the community. So you'd rather try to find ways to avoid conflict, or to, sometimes people say, oh, ninja were just assassins. Actually, they weren't. But in certain circumstances, if they saw like, hey, this general is marching these thousands of people up here and they're going to try to take us out, it would probably behoove us to try to take the general out, because then these guys can't function without their general. So maybe we try to assassinate that person, versus me trying to fight in honor, blood and guts on the battlefield, our 100 or 200 people against 10,000 of those guys, like we're Spartans or something. That wasn't their ideal. Their ideal was to use what they knew to avoid conflict as much as possible.
Yeah, the movies are great. The ninja movies are my favorite. And like 6th degree black belt, that's substantial. Just to get to be a black belt is next level. That's amazing. And so what does that actually mean? How do you get to be a 6th degree black belt in ninjutsu?
Yeah. So that's a great question as well. So like in our stages of ninjutsu, we have these different levels of growth. And so we use the elements, with this thing called the Godai, the 5 elements, as a guideline for how we operate and how we train and learn. And so each element is considered a level of training. And so if you think of, in our elements are earth, water, fire, wind, and void. And so as you're going through your basic levels, you start off in earth, and then you really master what it means to be earth, or you at least understand, you have a deep understanding. And then you move into water, and you have a deep understanding of what it means to respond from a water element or a water energy. Okay, I'm very scientific, I'm very analytical, I'm very responsive to things in my environment. Then you move to fire. I'm very engaged. I'm very connected. I'm very passionate about what's happening in my environment. Then you move to Wind. I'm very service oriented. I like to be a part of many different things. I'm looking at what's needed. I'm fitting in that space. And then you move to Void, and Void is your ability to move through all of the elements based on what you need. So most martial arts and most martial artists, or most people, fall into one or two of those categories. So they end up being mostly Earth. Hey, I like confidence. I like stability. I like security. Mostly Water. I like to think about problems. I hate conflict. I like to kind of stay away from that. I'm mostly Fire. I'm very passionate. I like to bring things into the world. I like to connect with people. So we have those. And so that's great. But what happens when who you are and how you operate in the world doesn't work for the situation that you're in? So the ninja were very understanding of, okay, well, I need to be able to shapeshift. I need to be able to meld into one of these other elements and use that element for the betterment of the environment as well as myself. And so in our martial arts, we're trying to teach people that. And there's ways to do that, again, physically, emotionally, mentally, and really develop that skill set of being able to change and transition. Once you get your black belt, now it's the mastery level. So, okay, yeah, you have the basics of what it means to understand Earth, Water, and Fire, and how to use that in a physical altercation, how to use that in an emotional altercation or emotional challenge. But now you are in the mastery levels. So you start over again, but you're really diving deep. So if you think about elementary school math to high school math to college level math, that's kind of the way we work. You know, you start off with this elementary school understanding of the elements and how to use them. And then you move on to the black belt levels where you start really gaining a high school level of understanding of how to use this information. And then you move into the higher black belt levels, you know, 4th degree and above, and you start moving into this college level of understanding of how to use the elements. And so that's kind of how the science goes, how the training goes.
Like to just become a black belt, how long would that take on average if you're a hardcore student and you're training substantially?
Yeah, if you're a hardcore student, it's different. So, and I got my first degree black belt in about 2.5 years of training, which is unusual. It normally takes people 4 to 5 years. But I moved from New Jersey to Ohio just to train in this martial art. And so I was training at my teacher's house. I was training at the school. I was training at the park with other students. I was training literally. That's what I moved to Ohio to do, like just train in this martial art. So I kind of accelerated through the first degree. It took me about 2 years to get my second degree. And then I didn't get my third degree until I was in the Army. I had deployed, but I was still training. We had a sister school that wasn't far from Fort Bragg, so I would go out there and train with those guys. It took me a couple more years, but you know, I was able to get that third degree probably about 4 years later. So,
okay, yeah, that's pretty awesome, man. Do you ever watch UFC or mixed martial arts?
Yeah, I love UFC and I love mixed martial arts. I think it really highlights some of the amazing qualities of fighters and people who are able to put themselves out there and really push themselves to the limit.
Yeah, huge fan of UFC also. The past several months though, I don't know if I'm getting soft or what, but I see some of these knockouts, these devastating knockouts, and I'm like, man, I was really enjoying the fight until I saw that guy get brutally knocked out. Would have been nice if you could have gone the distance, but they know what they're doing when they go in there. They put their heart and souls in the ring. And I watch almost every fight. Like you say, it's incredible to see what the human mind and the human body can do. Just to cut weight for that is incredible.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Much respect. But I was hoping we could talk about the survival side of things. And I want to get into the Psi Games, which you've started, which I think is incredible. Huge fan of that. I was looking through some of the people on the board or a part of it, and I've interviewed some of those people. Amazing minds. The remote viewing, totally fascinating. Telepathy, stuff like that. Psychic abilities. Huge fan. I think it's very, very real, but most of us, when we do it, we don't understand we're doing it, and then we kind of talk ourselves out of it, which is weird, but it seems to
yeah
work. But you've been on Naked and Afraid.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
Yeah, I want to backtrack just a little bit, make sure that I get this right. It's actually the Psi Games, not the PSI Games. So,
Thank you.
just so the audience knows if they're hearing it and they're looking it up. But then now fast forward back to what you were saying. The being on Naked and Afraid was like, oh man, it was super powerful. It was very intense. It was very scary at first, thinking about being up there on the mountain. And, you know, when you first start off with a lot of things, especially when you're an alpha male, you have this kind of drive where you say to yourself, like, oh, yeah, I can do that. You know I'm tough and this, that, and other. And but then when you're out there and you realize, like, hey, I'm out here, I have to really survive, it becomes a different thing. It's very difficult, to deal with all of the different levels. As a matter of fact, somebody asked me just last night if I ever thought about being on the show alone. And I said, yeah, I would love to be on that show. But I just couldn't leave my business for an undetermined amount of time. And they were like, well, do you think you would succeed? I said, yeah, everybody thinks they'll succeed. But the reality of actually being out there and living in the wild, who knows what things you're going to go through, how your mind is going to play tricks on you. And so or you just have these different feelings that surface that you didn't know were there. And so it makes it very difficult in that way, because some people haven't pushed themselves to that limit. So they don't really know where they stand and how they're going to deal with different challenges that will come up based on the environment that they're in.
Right. So when you were on Naked and Afraid, like, how did they just find your information? The directors find your information online, and then they reached out to you and asked you to be on the show?
No, actually, I applied. So I was having coffee with a friend who's special forces guy, and we would always meet for coffee and just talk about current events and what was going on and strategize and all types of stuff. And he was asking me, he was like, have you ever heard of the show Naked and Afraid? And I was like, no. He was like, he brought up this funny comment. He said, why don't more Black people do outdoor wilderness stuff? And I was like, what? I was like, me, I'm a survivalist, and he's a Caucasian guy. So we laughed. We were drinking this coffee, and, that stuck with me. I was like, I'm going to go home. I'm going to show this guy like what it's all about. So I'm going to find the show. I found the show. I was like, I'm going to sign up, and I'm sure I won't get a call back. So I'll just tell them, hey, look, people probably try and they don't get called back. And sure enough, they called me back like a couple months later, and they were like, hey, we want you on the show. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is it. I got to do it now. So that's how it transpired.
So when you accept the offer,
Mm-hmm.
like, what the hell is going through your mind? Like, I'm going to be naked for X amount of days with somebody I don't know, with cameras all over me. Like, that's got to be a weird feeling. In the raw, showing it all. Like, what was that like?
Yeah, that was very, very different. And I deal with stress pretty well. So, as those thoughts were coming up, I was just like, whatever. And, I had been in some interesting situations in like SERE School where, there was times where I was exposed, and, so I was like, okay, well, this can't be that bad. It'll be uncomfortable or weird, because of somebody I don't know, but I'll get over it really fast. And I think, what people watching don't get is when they say go, they kind of leave you to your own devices, and they're not messing with you anymore. And when you're out there and they say go, you really realize, like, wait a minute, I'm here on the side of a mountain and I'm just here. These guys are not going to help me. I got to figure out how to do this. And that really takes over. Your survival instinct takes over, and all the other stuff kind of goes out of the window. I've had weird questions about, oh, your partner was beautiful. Did you ever think? I'm like, bro, you don't think about anything but, like, where am I going to get my food? How am I going to get my water? How am I going to build this shelter? And I need to get the hell out of here. So I hope these days go by fast, right? You're not thinking about, like, do they think my penis is big, or all that stuff is like, that's all like comfortable societal stuff. That's not survival stuff. And people who have been in true survival situations know better. A matter of fact, in PSYOP, we use the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if your basic needs aren't met, your mind and body doesn't even transition into this idea of, sexual procreation or moving on to these things. Like your instinct in your body knows that it does not have the resources to deal with that. So until the resources are met, none of that other stuff matters. And you're wired that way. I truly believe that.
Wow, man. What a trip. I would have a real tough time doing that. So super respect to you for that, to make it through that. Did you make it through the whole experience?
Yes, we did. And I think that I'm loving that, you're saying you're not sure about going through something like that, because it's true. People don't understand how hard it is to do things like that until they actually try them. Like a lot of, you hear people all the time say, oh, well, I fasted for, 3 days. I know I can fast for 21 days. Well, no, you don't, because you don't know what that's going to be like. And then you add on to that, walking around with no shoes, the temperature changing drastically overnight or every hour, you having to build a shelter, the constant nagging of all of the bugs and the flies that you can't just go get away from or use bug spray to help you deal with. It's just, everything adds up, and that's very difficult for people to handle. And, sometimes people armchair quarterback and believe that they can handle those things. But the reality is that if they ever were in that situation, maybe they might rise and overcome, but quite often people will quit, and that's okay. Because you learn something about yourself and you grow. But it may not be as easy as people will make it out to seem.
Armchair quarterbacks are undefeated. There's
absolutely undefeated.
No competition there. It's got to be tough just to do those things in the wild with your clothes on and shoes on and a jacket or a coat if you need it. But to do it with no clothes on, with somebody you don't know. Now, the person that you went out there and had this experience with, was she versed in survival, or was it like you had to kind of show her the ropes on how to deal with things?
So she had some survival knowledge. She grew up, from what I understand, she grew up with a family that lived kind of, in a tent, and they would travel around all the time. But there were some definite challenges there in some gaps in her survival training that were identified as we went on, and I could see those things. And so, but there were places that she was very strong. So I remember she found some strawberries, some little baby strawberries. And I was like, dude, I don't even know how you saw that, because I would have just stomped right on them. And that was great. She shared them with me, and we had it wasn't really much substance, but, morality wise, it really helped with the morale. And so that was something that was some things that she would do. She found some little baby crabs, like, we ate those. And it was just stuff like that was really awesome. Meanwhile, we built a shelter together, and I built this, I started one shelter, finished it. I lived in it for a couple of days, then because she had gotten sick and they kind of pulled her back for a little bit. And then she came back and we built a bigger shelter together, and she put together this fireplace on the side, and it was beautiful. So there were times where there were things that she really, really knew. And then there were a lot of survival things that I felt like were basic that she did not have an understanding of. But, it was just a matter of us growing together. That's what makes a good team.
Right on. Are you guys still friends?
Unfortunately, we're not. There were some challenges we did have out there that kind of carried over into our normal lives that just made it not something conducive for us to be able to have a friendship or any type of, camaraderie after the show.
Okay. That's too bad.
Yeah.
Well, at least you both had that experience. Talk about something to put on the resume.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And I'm wondering, so there's been a lot of talk about, let's just go back several months ago. Let's look at the news and geopolitics. There's been entire countries that have lost their power. And there's been talks of what if it happened to us? What if it happened in the United States? I've heard everything from people wouldn't make it a week, 90% of the population would die off because they wouldn't know how to deal with things. And I mean, I don't know any of that. That's just, stuff that you hear on the internet. We all know everything's real on the internet. So you have personal experience. I mean, if anybody's going to know or have a good idea, it would be you. So let's say something happens tomorrow to the grid in the United States, and practically nobody has power except for those that have their own battery banks and such. What do you see happening to the majority of civilization? Would it collapse? And if so, how long would it take?
Yeah, so we have actual evidence of this. There was a blackout in New York City. I believe it was like in the 80s or the 90s or something like that. And that blackout lasted for a week, I believe. And there was mass chaos. People could not live, and it was in the summer. So it was so hot, people could not stay inside the buildings. You had people on the bridge, you had people in the street, living in the street. And because of that, because you had also people who lived on the street who may not have all had their mental faculties. So they were attacking people. You had gangs now that were out on the streets. They were attacking people. You had these empty buildings that were easy to pull people into. People were stealing water, stealing food, all this type of stuff. It was mass chaos only for less than a week. So we have any type of prolonged situation, especially in major cities, you're going to have a lot of death right away. We saw that in Hurricane Katrina. And then when you move out into the more suburban and rural cities, you might have less, especially if you're in a rural environment, because those people tend to, like, just for instance, I own 100 acres of land. And one of the things I was surprised to find out was how hard it was to get someone to do plumbing out there, right? So then you have to learn a lot of your own plumbing. And then it's hard to get people to do electrical out there. So then you learn a lot about electrical. So those skills just kind of happen as a byproduct out there. You have to dispose of your own trash because, you have to bring it into the city and then put it in the trash dump. So you learn a lot of self-reliance just by living out in the rural area. So I think those people will be a lot better off, but they would still have challenges if they didn't have long-term stores of supplies. Another thing I have on my property is a well. I have well water. I don't have city water. So I can do a hand pump if I need to, or I've been working on getting like this solar pump so that I could have like solar power pumping. I have a creek and I have a river. So there's ways for me to get water. I have deer that are prominent on my property. There's ways for me to get food. People who live in the city don't always have those options or don't know how to do it because they've lived in such comfort. So when the power goes out, you'll have some really major issues. And that's going to be people not knowing how to deal with not having access to food or water at their leisure. And that's going to create mass chaos and mass panic. You also have people who operate on machinery. So you have go ahead.
Geez. So like, what would 3 things be if you could tell somebody, hey, look, these are 3 things you need to do just in case shit hits the fan scenario. I was looking for the abbreviation of that. What would you say the top 3 things would be?
So you definitely need water because you can't function so long without water. It would be nice to have some food stores, some freeze-dried food or something, which means you need more water than what you thought because you're going to need to be able to put water into that freeze-dried food. And then if you had some sort of heating or lighting capacity. If you live in a hot environment, you may need some place to stay cool. If you live in a cool environment, you need some place to stay warm. And those things are the things that we know will take you out. So we look at the law of threes. We know 3 hours without thermoregulation or extreme exposure to hot or cold can kill you immediately. I mean, within that 3 hours. So pretty soon. Then you have After that, water, 3 days without water. So if you don't have water for 3 days, and most of us aren't designed to last the 3 days because, or we don't set our lives up to last 3 days because we're already dehydrated every day. We don't drink enough water on a daily basis. We drink a lot of coffee, a lot of sodas. So we're already dehydrated. So we may not even have 3 days. And then you have 3 weeks without food. And so if you just take that understanding and just prep based on that, of course, it'll be good to have batteries and flashlights and stuff like that. That'll give you an edge. But the first things you really want to be able to take care of is, that food and water, and then also that thermal regulation, which would, a lot of people equate to shelter. So have some sort of shelter, have some sort of water, have some sort of food. And maybe things that help you get that easier would be, of course, a flashlight. And, if you had some electrical appliances that, run off of like solar power or solar energy, that would always be great too.
Most people live in big cities. They're surrounded by lots of people. Many people live in apartments, so they can't really grow a lot of their own food, but you still can a little bit. So like if you got stuck in a big city, the power goes out, things go chaotic, what would you do?
So if I was in a big city, the first thing I try to do is get the hell out of the big city. And immediately when I recognize like the power is going out, if I knew that the power was going to be out, of course, that's within reason. So power goes out places all the time, goes out for like a couple hours, then it pops back on. So I don't want to create mass panic in myself or my family within that first 3 hours. But the minute I realize that it's probably going to be a longer term situation, then I'm trying to get the hell out of the city and go somewhere else. Just because I know it's going to get bad if it continues on that path. Now, if I get to a point where it's too late and I can't get out of the city, then I have to understand about sheltering in place. And then where is it best to shelter in place? What's going to be my my fallback plan if my current location gets really, really compromised? I have to know where else I'm going to go. And the more hidden you are, the better, because people will be looking for food. They'll look for resources, and they'll look to take what you have. And you'll be amazed at what psychology people go through when they don't have things. So, you might we saw in this New York, and we saw in Hurricane Katrina and several other disasters, people were raping people. They didn't have food, they didn't have water, but they still wanted to rape somebody, so you have just craziness across the spectrum. So getting away from mass amounts of people is probably your best bet, and making sure you stay hidden. And that's one of the things that I would do.
Man, I remember Hurricane Katrina at the stadium where they had a bunch of people, even at the stadium with police officers there and security, there was horrible things that were taking place. So, I mean, wow. The dark side definitely comes out when cataclysms take place, and it takes the righteous to prevail. Wow, man, I'm fascinated with your background. I'm so impressed with what you have gone through to be where you are today, and I'm also really impressed with the Psi Games you've got. I want to show this off. It's your website. Is it okay if I show it off real quick?
Yeah, please.
Okay, let me do this, because one thing I've always been, well, I shouldn't say always. Well, yeah, pretty much always. One thing I've always been fascinated with is the ability to do stuff that's outside of the five senses, to manipulate reality with your mind, to read somebody's mind, or know what they're thinking sometimes, or to be able to influence. I'm really impressed with that. I've actually had out-of-body experiences before that I wasn't even trying to. I was going to sleep in my bed. I popped out of my body, and this was 20 years ago almost, and it scared the hell out of me. I didn't know what to do. So sorry. Oh, that's all right. It's all right. So I woke myself back up, and I was like, wait, what did I just, and then I fell asleep again. I popped out of my body. And anyway, make a long story short, I started to study and research out-of-body experiences and telekinesis, psychic abilities. And I learned a lot. I was kind of stuck in a mindset of fear at that point when I had those out-of-body experiences. I thought that if I popped out of my body, like a demon was going to take over or something like that, because I just didn't know enough about it. But you probably had to learn a lot about the sixth sense and what people would consider psychic abilities when you were studying ninjutsu, and you probably still do study and practice the arts, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely. So that was one of the things that really got me interested in the idea of psychic abilities. You know, I of course came up watching the cartoons and really being drawn to those and different characters that had different abilities, and then loving sci-fi. But then ninjutsu has these 9 ninja powers, these 9 abilities, and those abilities are very important to their survival. And they learned how to call forth these different abilities, whether it be seeing things in a different time and place, sensing danger before it got you, or before it entered your area, being able to put yourself in what we call like a flow state, where you're able to kind of see what's going to happen before it happens, and then be able to respond to it as like you would be an ultimate athlete. So there would be all of these there were 9 different abilities that they really practice. And one of them, of course, was this idea of remote viewing. They didn't call it that back then, but it was the same thing. How do I see places in a different time and space? Another one would be manifestation. How do I manifest the proper outcome or the things that I need to help me survive? And this is all stuff that we're doing now, but they were doing it back then. And that really was exciting for me. And then as I became older and I started to get more into this understanding, I started seeing and teaching, I started seeing my youth, and they were pretending to be these cool Naruto anime characters. And I would tell them, hey, you know, we have something like that in our art. They would ask me like, well, how do you do it? And I didn't really have an answer for them. I was like, I don't really know. How do I teach this kid to do it right away? You know? And that ultimately was one of the things that I was like, wow, how do I teach kids to do these cool things? And I was like, well, maybe there are protocols out there for them. So I looked it up and I found remote viewing teachers, like my main teacher, Paul Smith, and I went to go train with him. And then I found mind sight teachers who could teach you how to see without your eyes, because the ways I had learned how to do those things were through long-term experiential training, which, you know, for a kid, that's just really long. That takes a long time. You know, like I've been training in ninjutsu for 24, 25 years. So to say, hey, kid, trained for many years and maybe one day you'll have an experience, is just not something that a kid wants to hear, nor an adult for most people. So how do I give you an experience right now that shows you that you're more than your physical body, that you have this opportunity to really explore your multidimensionality, and awaken you to that possibility and those possibilities? And these protocols gave me that opportunity to teach people so that they can have the opportunity to understand who they truly are as a multidimensional being. And that's ultimately led to the Psi Games. Well, how do we, once we prove this, how do we grow those abilities? Well, one of the best ways that we've seen to really institute growth and change is through competition. Now, of course, we have negative competition, which is I'm good, you suck. And then we have positive competition, which is, man, I didn't think anybody could go that far. That actually inspires me to grow to the next level. And so how do we create an environment where you have this type of positive reinforcement, this positive growth and change? And that's really what I'm trying to institute here. That's
cool. I'd like to see a future generation of Jedi. That would be good. Not the Sith, not the Sith. So like the remote viewing that you do and that you teach, and that you teach in the courses here, explain that to us, because I bless you. I think that most people that don't know what remote viewing is might have a misinterpretation in their mind of what, like, are you using the military protocols for remote viewing, or how do you?
Yeah, so sometimes I do. My main teacher was one of the military originals. He came like the second wave of folks. His name is Paul Smith. And then I've trained with Joe McMonagle, and I've trained a little with Lynn Buchanan, and I've trained with Bill Ray. So I've trained with a bunch of these people. And so that's some of what I do. But also what I've been working on is how do we kind of have another means of remote viewing, but without using the longer protocols. so that it becomes more accessible to people, and also it lends itself to be used in our natural environment, right? So as it stands right now, yes, I can see things in a different time and place and gather information about that thing that I can't see or I don't have access to, other than through means of the mind and the mind processes that help me with remote viewing. So that's great, but I can't always have us sit down in my room with my incense and doing a cool down and then writing out all of the things, because that's just going to take too long. How does that help me in my everyday life? Well, how do we build that? Well, we start training and we start working in an environment that causes us to have to do that on the fly, because that's how we live, right? So if I'm living in the world and things are happening on the fly, there's only but so much you can plan for. Then I need to be able to operate in that world, and I need to train for that world. So if I want to use these skill sets or these abilities that we have in my actual life, then I have to train them with spontaneity. I have to train them under pressure to allow me to then translate that information or translate that knowledge out into the real world. And that's what the Psi Games is about.
And you've got an event coming up in about 2 months, right? 2 months.
Yeah, August 1st to the 3rd. The Psi Games is going to be held in Charlottesville, Virginia. And we'll be doing this event. It's going to be a great event. We have lectures and workshops, so people who are interested in learning can learn from the best in the field, many of the best in the field. People who want to see what it's like when people have these abilities and they can push themselves will be there, and they'll be partaking in these challenges. So we'll have the games on that Saturday. And then we have some panel discussions about ethics and things of that nature. We also have a lot of community events. We're going to do a Sky Watch with a gentleman named Chris Bledsoe. We're going to have side tribe meetings where you can meet people of like minds who might be in your area, and talk to them and form a community around whatever Psi ability you're most interested in, whether that's remote viewing or precognition or whatever the case may be. So we'll have that. So we'll have a multitude of different things for people to experience while they're there, besides just the games themselves. And it's a family event, so you can bring kids 6 and up. Come kids 6 to 14 are free. They're free entry. So then parents who bring those kids actually get 30% off.
That's really cool. And it looks like you're helping out with kids that are on the spectrum.
Yes.
That's awesome. I would say a lot of times people that are on the spectrum especially seem to have higher ability, like their heightened abilities with reading people's minds. I swear my 8-year-old, he's on the spectrum. And when he was like, he had a while there when he was around 6 where he didn't even talk to his teachers. And he would look at me sometimes like he was talking to me, and I should be able to just read his mind. Like, I'm like, yeah, son, I get it. I'm trying, man. I'm trying. So I think that's, and now he's talking great. Like he'll talk your head off, but I've definitely noticed people that are on the spectrum seem to have heightened psychic abilities. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it seems that way. And I worked, like I said, I worked with several kids. When I first started working with the kids, I would think that they weren't paying attention. So like if I was teaching them at school and they were looking away or whatever, and I would say their name and I'd be like, what did I just say? And they would repeat word for word, even though they weren't looking at me and they were doing something else, it was still getting in there. So they have this amazing potential or amazing ability to be able to pull in information. Even though from our standard, they're not paying attention, but they really are. They're just operating on a different level. So whereas we need to like actually look at something and focus on it and go through our process, they don't have to do that. And so I'm really amazed at the different discoveries that we're having around youth that are on the spectrum, because they really are special in so many ways.
That's cool, man. That's really cool. Well, I want to help as much as I can with this event that you have coming up. So if I can help you promote it, if there's anything that I could do to help get the word out there, please let me know off air. Send me an email. Maybe we could do some more promotions of this, because this is what it's about. Like I'm so amazed by the psychic and mental abilities that people have, the spiritual abilities people have, that seem to be more like they're talked about more now. If you would have brought this stuff up 20 years ago, I think it would have been considered new age, but it's not new age. It's far from new age. I mean, if anything, this is old school. This is what, at one point, if the scriptures are real, when they say we all spoke one language, and I've been reading scriptures that are pre-scriptures that talk anyway. So I think it's fascinating. I don't think you should take it literal. But if there was a time when we were all communicating in one language, it would make the most sense if we were communicating telepathically.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that one of the things that's really cool about understanding where we are and what we're capable of is that as we dive deeper into this, we will realize how little separation there is between us as individuals, and how we are all connected to certain things. That's one of the things I love about psychokinesis or telekinesis, is that when you are actually engaging with matter and moving or changing the direction of that matter, or whatever you're doing, influencing it, then you really start to have to question yourself and say, holy smokes, I am not separate from this thing. When I think a thought of moving this object, it's moving. So what does that tell me? That tells me that I'm, really connected with more than what I just believe I'm connected with, which is other people. And the only time I feel connected with other people is when they say the right things to me, and when I say the right things to them, or when they treat me the right way. But ultimately, I'm connected with people on a deeper level than that, where we don't even have to use words. I'm connected with plants on a deeper level than that, where I just walk through the field and they're already communicating to other plants that something's here and what I'm doing and what direction I'm going. That even the smallest thing, like a piece of tinfoil, I'm connected to. I'm able to use my intention, use my mind to actually work with that object and make that object move, that matter moves. So on some level, we're connected. And I think that's probably one of the greatest gifts that we can get from our psychic exploration, is us understanding that we are these connected beings and that we aren't all separate. And maybe, hopefully, maybe just like it would be atrocious for you to hurt someone in your family, your immediate family. Once we realize that we're all connected, maybe we start realizing that we're all immediate family, and that to hurt someone who isn't my blood is still hurting me as though I'm hurting somebody that's my blood, because we're so interconnected. I don't know, maybe it's an idealistic way to think, but I think that when you do these skills, when you use these skills and you do these challenges, you start to really understand that on a deep level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Karma could be looked at many ways, but I've often wondered, everything that I see in this, in this reality, will I then experience the other things that I saw in that reality towards this reality, if that makes sense? Like you see a bug. Oh, here's a bug. Smash. The bug gets smashed in the window. Will I be that bug that gets smashed in the window? Will that be me? Gosh, I hope not, but I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. Like, how many experiences do we want to have? Are all of our experiences going to be in human bodies? And I don't know, but it's amazing to think about. And I'm super impressed with what you're doing. Too bad I'm not out there in California right now, or I'd shake your hand. I know you're at contact in the desert. So now you've got a conference coming up for that, which is, you said today, right? Or did you say it was tomorrow?
Yeah, I have a workshop today in which we'll be going over this thing that I call psychic play. It's a class called psychic play. And we'll talk about how, instead of having a rigid, scary environment like a lab, like just having people play and have fun with it could be very beneficial to the growth of psychic abilities. And so we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to play some games.
Right on. Well, Hakim, it's been an honor to speak with you folks. If you want to listen to part 2 of this, we're going to jump on over to Patreon for part 2. but I'm going to leave the links in the video description box. So make sure to click those links if you're interested in learning more. And I'm going to leave Hakim's website in the video description box. Literally the Black MacGyver. How freaking cool is that, man? That's pretty cool. All right. Well, thanks everybody. I'll see you on Patreon. Have a beautiful day and be the change you want to see. Thanks, Hakim.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.